It's one of the great things I love in my job is when someone comes along and they say, gosh, I didn't know Picasso made jewellery. And you're like, yeah, well, you know, there's a lot of artists who made jewellery and many, many people don't know about it. And it's really interesting. It's fascinating from an art point of view and from a jewellery point of view. And it's also, you know, I just feel like not enough people know about this.
Jewelry is just another form of expression for an artist. It's the effect it has on people, and I can't believe that artists, when they do artist jewelry, they do not think about the effect they will have on people.
Welcome to If Jewels Could Talk. I'm Carol Woolton, the voice of jewellery, an author, broadcaster, and the woman who initiated the role of jewellery editor at magazines like Tatler and British Vogue. This is a podcast for everyone, for people who do like jewellery, for people who don't realise they like jewellery, and anyone intrigued by fascinating facts, new ideas, and forgotten histories. So please join me as I tell sparkly tales, meeting all sorts of people, delving into 4 centuries of jewellery culture, and investigate what's happening now. Artists and sculptors have often explored different mediums endowed with new expressive potential, and arguably the most intimate form of this work is a small piece of jewellery. In 1961, the French writer Evelyne Schlumberger wrote, "We talk about jewels, we talk about them, but Picasso refuses to talk about them. He has locked up his jewellery work behind the thick walls of his chateau in Vauvenargues and locked himself in a silence laden with mystery." It's a little known but essential part of Picasso's work. And today, we're going to talk about wearable miniature artworks, and in particular, those being exhibited in the exhibition Picasso and Artist's Jewellery at the Museo Picasso in Barcelona, Spain. I'm delighted that we're joined by the curator of this exhibition, Manon Lecaplain, and the London-based gallery owner, Louisa Guinness, author of Art as Jewellery, Calder to Capor. Manon, thank you so much for joining us today to tell us about the exhibition Picasso and Artist's Jewellery. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you so much for having me here.
And thank you, Louisa, for joining us in London.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thanks for inviting me to do this as well.
Well, firstly, I wanted, Louisa, can you kick off by telling us the description? What is artist's jewellery and what defines it? And why does it differ from pieces of jewellery designed by jewellery designers?
Gosh, what a huge question. But a great way to start. A question that I'm often asked, actually. In my world, artist's jewellery is jewellery that is made by people who are mainly painters and sculptors. Their number one profession is not to be a jeweller. In the bigger, grander scheme and the large world of jewellery, of course, there are lots of wonderful, wonderful artists, and their main vocation is to make jewellery, and so they're artists in their own right. But for the purposes, I think, of what we're here for, we're talking about people who are mainly painters and sculptors, and their main thing is not really jewellery. So people like Picasso and Calder and Max Ernst and all those wonderful names that we know, going back right through to today.
And of course, it's not just the contemporary artists who turn their hand to jewels. This is historically something that's always happened. In Renaissance Florence, learning goldsmithing was part of an artist's training, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was part of kind of what you did when you went to art college in that sort of day. And you can see it. People made beautiful pieces of jewellery, but it was also transposed into the paintings that we see. And you can trace it right back to the beginning. But it's only more recently, I think, in the last 150 years that the artists have started to take it more, but more sort of seriously, and really dig into it and try to produce things as an extension of their work. And so it's sort of seen as another way of expressing themselves, not just through their paintings and other traditional methods.
So they have the same parameters, really, as a jewellery designer, in that it's something small and portable and created around the body to be worn on the body.
Yeah, I think they do, but there's a very, very big difference from the traditional jewellery designers. And number one is, I think a jewellery designer starts with the sort of premise that they either have a gemstone or they want to create something that kind of people really love to wear, that makes them feel more beautiful and makes them feel better. And an artist may not have either of those things. They may start with a concept. And to be honest, quite often I think they're not particularly interested in how it really looks and how it makes someone feel, or not in such a way as a traditional jewellery designer will be. And the second thing is usually sort of production. A traditional jewellery maker they'll be kind of slightly dictated by production costs and production constraints, and whether they're going to make one piece or two pieces or what have you. An artist doesn't take any of that into consideration at all, and believe me, I know. They kind of have. I like to give them a very free rein because that's the whole point of it. But I think the difference is that because the artists are really just doing what they feel like doing, it comes really from their heart, and they're trying to perhaps give a message or say something. It's not necessarily just about the beauty of the piece. So I think those are two kind of quite different places from which they come, and therefore there's room for both. Actually, I think they're both kind of interesting to balance off each other.
And do you think any artist can set their sights on creating jewellery? Because I know you've worked with people as diverse as Israeli-born architectural designer Ron Arad, Irish-born conceptual artist Michael Craig Martin, or does the artist need an interest in jewellery?
I think they have to have a little interest in jewellery. I worked with Ed Ruscha, for example, and when I first approached him, he was not really interested in jewellery. But he rang me back 6 months later and said, well, you actually tickled my mind and now I am interested and let's try and do this. So I think it helps. It also helps if they've worked in 3 dimensions in some sort of form, because they understand and they can make probably better jewellery, just because it's just not that easy to suddenly turn your hand to doing something that other people have been struggling to do for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, all their life. You can't just suddenly say, right, I'm going to make jewellery. So there's a lot of things that go into it. There's the person who's involved with making it, and many times it's me or somebody else, another collaborator. And then there's the goldsmith. And so, yeah, it definitely helps if they've got a sort of mind that will understand how the thing will be finished, or how they can conceive the finished product. But often it's a sort of journey, and it can change and move and change directions as we go along. But it's actually not as easy as many people may think.
So, Manon, you've curated this exhibition of Picasso and other artists' jewels. How many pieces do you have in the exhibition?
Yes, I created this exhibition but with Emmanuel Guigon, who is the director of the museum. Mm-hmm. And we have 86 Picasso's jewels in this exhibition.
86. So was that difficult to find them? Was it difficult to get people to lend them for the exhibition?
Yes, actually it was difficult to find them and to have them too, because these are personal pieces, these are intimate pieces, and they're not in public collections for the most part, and they're in private hands, and therefore it's a bit difficult to manage to have them sometime. And actually the COVID that made the task a little bit more difficult.
A bit more difficult and complicated.
Yeah.
But when you were curating these and amassing, as well as Picasso's and lots of other artists' jewellers' work, do you consider the pieces are miniature artworks, or do you see them as miniatures of an artwork?
I think they are miniature artworks themselves.
Yes.
And there is no doubt about this.
So not necessarily relating to the art that they were creating at the time.
Yeah. Of course, there are. They are. In the case of Picasso, which is the case I know most, the pieces he creates in jewelry are linked to the big pieces he creates at the same time. They are the same themes, the same materials, the same. It's all linked, but jewels are works of art in themselves.
Yeah, so. Just smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carol, I would completely agree with that, and I think that most of the artists who have made jewelry since and now today would also agree with that. They sort of see them as another part of their work. It's like you make paintings, you make sculpture, you make photographs, you make jewelry. And some are extremely good at it. And I would also agree completely with what Manon says, is that the good ones are the ones that linked to their work and what they're doing. I think if they sort of just suddenly take something randomly out of the blue and say, oh, I want to make this piece of jewelry, well, anyone can do that. That's not really what it's about.
Yeah, it's just, jewelry is just another form of expression for an artist. And it's just another art form of expression. There is also this thing that Niki Saint-Phal said. She said that, and I have to take back my notes, she said that jewels were like porte-bonheur, talismans that protected her, and that she liked the effect they had on her and on the other person and on the other people. And I think this is a really good way to describe an artist's jewel.
It affects the person wearing and the person viewing the jewel.
Yeah, it's the effect it has on people. And I can't believe that artists, when they do artist jewelry, they do not think about the effect they will have on people.
So can you tell me one of the jewels that really relates to one of Picasso's quite well-known artworks that you have in the exhibition?
Well, the first ones I'm thinking about are the Madura editions, the editions made by the Suzanne and Georges Ramier, who had the portrait studio in Valoris in the south of France. And for example, the drawings, the themes of these jewels were phones and birds and oh my God, how do you say that in English?
The bulls.
Yeah, bulls. Yeah, taureau. Yeah, bulls. These are really the same themes that Picasso is exploring in his paintings at the time. And for example, another jewel is the large necklace, the old necklace he made with Françoise Gillot. There is an owl on this necklace, and in the same period is doing sculptures of owls in bronze. So
actually, you said, Carol, you were going to talk about, what's your favourite piece. That is my favourite piece from the exhibition. I think it's a really gorgeous piece. It's made from bone and some stone that he's just picked up, and he's just drawn a few simple lines and made it into an owl. And he was as Manon says, he was very much doing owls at that time, wasn't he?
It's also my favorite piece.
Is it? Oh my word! You both have the same.
It's also my favorite piece. It was made with 4 hands because it was made by François Gillot and by Pablo Picasso at the time, and I think it's just a beautiful collective artwork.
And it's also in that absolutely fabulous photograph, which is one of my favourite photographs, by Robert Capa, with the picture of them walking on the beach with the umbrella.
Oh, yes.
And she's wearing it in that.
And so you have quite a lot of the drawings and portraits that go along to show some of these pieces, don't you, that he created, or they're worn on people?
Yeah, most part of the drawings and the engravings are not with jewels made, but with other jewels. But yeah, he represents them all the time. It's just like, it's a continuous line in his artwork. There are jewels at the beginning of his life, at the middle of his life, at the end of his life. There are jewels.
Do you know, did he ever buy jewellery? Do you know that, or did he just only make it?
No, actually, at the beginning he bought jewelry. For example, he bought earrings, large gold ring earrings for Fernand Olivier at the beginning of the 20th century. And then he bought jewels for Olga Kotlova, his first wife. Actually, there are even jewels he bought and then he modified. As for the jewels he offered to Dora Maar in the 30s, there are jewels he bought in the Marché des Puces in some markets. And it just engraved something in it or drew something in it, and it were jewels that he bought in the first place.
He was always sort of modifying. It was a bit like the stones and the pebbles that he used to spend hours collecting on the beach, and I think it became a sort of family tradition, didn't it? And because of his incredible draftsmanship, he could literally just use one line of a pen or a sharp object to engrave it and make something absolutely just totally Picasso and him. And that was nice to see in the exhibition. And then also some of the terracotta things they were which I think he made later on. And again, he engraved and just carved out shapes and drawings and lines, didn't he?
Yeah.
I like the way in the catalogue you refer to that, the way he kind of marked pebbles, as you talk about the border being permeable with only a single step between the found object and an engraved jewel. And I think that summed it up very well, that it's something very simple, but it is that step that takes it from a found object into a piece of jewellery. And that you said he often threw those back into the sea, and he imagined who would find them in the future, and what a conundrum that would make for archaeologists who found them.
Yeah. Actually, I did not think he really put them back in the sea. It was just some kind of dream, of some kind of thought of him. And I think it was linked to his humor, to how he liked to just make fun of people around him, and he compared this to headache to archaeologists if they were to be found in the sea.
What would they think they were?
Yeah.
But actually, I've interviewed Paloma Picasso quite a few times in my role at Vogue, and he certainly left a legacy for her. And she talks about walking on the beach, collecting pebbles, and she still does that. And in my latest book, The New Stone Age, I quote her saying, "On holiday, I'll swim to shore from a sailboat and collect pebbles, and I have to carry them back in my swimsuit. I weigh much more on the way back." So she describes this swimming with this weighted down with all these pebbles, because it's what she does and what she learnt doing with her father on the beach in the south of France. And of course, so many of the jewels really were made for people he loved, weren't they? They were for acquaintances, for friends, for family.
Yeah, most of them were for people around him. For example, when he was on the beach catching and just picking up these pebbles, these bones, these I don't know what, everything he could find. It was meant to be given to people around him, to Nouche-et-Loire, which happened to pass the summers with him in the south of France, with Lee Miller, the photographer, with everyone around him, with his children.
So they were very much tokens of devotion and admiration. Would he fashion them to suit that person, or they were just a gift he decided to give?
Well, for example, in the case of the jewels he made with his dentist in gold and plate, and that he offered to Françoise Gillot, there were jewels he wanted her to wear. And if she did not, and if she said she wouldn't like them, it was a bit mad. So yeah, I think he hopes them to be worn.
So an obligation in accepting the gift was you would wear it.
Yeah, actually, in Vivre avec Picasso, Françoise Gillot tells a lot about these stories of jewels, and it's quite interesting to know.
There's a great story about, I think it was Dora Maar, that there was a ring that was auctioned at Sotheby's about 4 or 5 years ago. It went for a fortune. But it was a little portrait of Dora Maar, and I think it was given to her because there was a story. She persuaded him to buy her a traditional, I think it was a ruby ring or something, and to swap it for a painting. And he was furious that she should actually want to give away one of his paintings. And they had a huge row. And so she threw the ring into the river. And then of course she was absolutely furious with herself later on because she didn't have the ring. And so they cleared out the canal. I think it was a canal actually, and tried to find it. They couldn't find it anywhere. And she was so upset that he painted her a little portrait and put it inside the sort of Victorian setting, which became the ring and the portrait of her, and was famously sold for, I think, over £500,000 or something the other day.
Yeah. And jewels often meant something in his relationship. We have also the story that Françoise Gillot tells. When she left him and she just came back at the Atelier des Grands Augustins, I think, he was mad, he was furious, and he just threw to her a watch she offered him, and he just said, "Your time is not mine anymore." And the watch was like the object linked to the fight. He used this object to represent the clash.
His anger at what had happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, again, Paloma Picasso said that one of her favourite pieces was a piece made by her father for her mother. It's a sun. It's a big round plate of gold, thin, that was hand-hammered by him with a little face in the centre. And it's the portrait of her mother that he gave to her mother, and François Gillot gave it to Paloma. And she loved it because she said it's a result of the love I come from. It's like the cosmos, where we come from, the light, the sun. So it's very important to me. And jewellery is eternal. And I guess that's what he was making. He was making things for people to keep as an object, as you say, of emotion. But why was he so secret in his lifetime, Manon, do you think, that he made jewellery? Why do you think he kept it so private?
Actually, this is a difficult question to answer, and we should ask to him, but we can't. So I really don't know. There are several explanations, but none of them really satisfies me. So
maybe because it was so personal.
Yeah. This is one of the explanations I thought about.
And he had sometimes more than one relationship going on at a time?
Also.
So that had to be kept quiet.
Yeah.
How many pieces he was actually making.
Yeah, exactly. So if they all came out, then people might discover a whole lot of history.
Yeah.
But it's true. And then he was eventually persuaded, wasn't he, to show his work, some of his jewellery, wasn't it? But then
yeah, some of them, but he refused for some of them. For example, there is a huge necklace, gold necklace, he made for Paul de Lazerne, gold with bulls, with head bulls, and this jewel. Paul de Lazerne wanted it to be exhibited in 1961, I think, if I remember well, and it just didn't happen, and it may have been because Picasso refused to show it.
Maybe also he feared that if these became known, they became to have a store of value, if people sold them, he wouldn't want that to happen. They were gifts, and I understand later on he used to give people lots of gifts of drawings and artworks as well, and apparently later on in his life, he started giving caviar because he said it was cheaper than the value of his art that he might give away. So maybe there was something in that as well.
Yeah, the art market was another reason I was thinking about when we prepared this exhibition, and also because there are counterfeits of his work of art, and counterfeits of jewels often easier to do than paintings, for example. So it may have been another reason, market of art. I don't know.
And how do you tell it's not a counterfeit? Were they all catalogued somewhere originally?
No, they're not catalogued. And actually, for a researcher, the first proof, and the proof that we prefer, is first-hand proof, like something written down by his friend, by his biograph that have known him something, or visual proofs, like photographs, for example. And when we don't have these elements, we just try to understand where it comes from. And for example, in the case of the Madura editions that have been translated into gold, a lot of them have been translated into gold in the US when Picasso was alive. And at the back of it, we don't have a signature firm by Picasso, but we have Empreinte Originale Madura, like a stamp. And these ones were counterfeits. And actually, with the works of art and with the jewels, in gold and in plate, the quality of the gold may be a proof of the authenticity of the work.
I think, Louisa, also I'm wondering, is it quite beguiling for artists to want to make these miniature works? Because I think for some artists, it might be a sort of quicker realisation of their work, and that might be attractive in some way to them.
Oh gosh, no, I think the opposite.
Do you think so?
Yeah, because it's so much more complicated to make jewellery. It's in a different material than they're used to. And if it's Picasso and he's used to making, something on a canvas, then he knows how to do that. But to suddenly have to produce things in a precious metal or even a non-precious metal or in a form that you're not used to, that's quite a lot more difficult. But it depends on what you're saying, because if you're picking up a stone off the beach and then just fashioning some lines and making something amazing out of it, then that's one thing. But if you're actually making a complicated piece of jewellery, which is sort of well thought out in advance, and you've got drawings and you know where you want to end up, then that's another very different thing. And as we all know, making jewellery is quite difficult and quite time consuming and quite expensive as well.
I remember talking to Frank Gehry at the time that he made some pieces of jewellery, and for him that was something very attractive, because obviously his projects as an architect could take 8 to 10 years to realise, and he was very attracted by making small objects.
Oh yeah, well that I can totally see that in that scale, but versus I'm not sure that certainly most of the pieces of most of the artists that I work with take longer. But saying that, someone like Calder, who was famous for going to spend the night in somebody's house, and you wake up in the morning and your knives and forks drawer had been transformed into a beautiful silver necklace, because he would go down in the night and sort of hammer out people's initials and make them into a little brooch for you, and that would be done very quickly. And his sculptures would take you ages to make, as you say, they're kind of large scale, and they'd have to go through a foundry and what have you. Although some of the smaller ones obviously wouldn't, but the big ones would. So yeah, maybe, but I don't think that would be a reason for artists to make jewellery. I think really the reason why they'd make it is because they want to, and they're intrigued by it, and it's got a message. And lots of people just love the idea of making something you can wear, and you can look at, and you have a little sculpture when you're not wearing it. It sort of still looks beautiful.
Well, it's interesting you brought up Calder. For people listening, Alexander Calder, the American sculptor known for his whimsical mobiles and monumental sculptures. And he really upended centuries of notions that sculpture should be static and grounded by making these mobiles.
Yeah.
And then his jewellery is sort of hammered flat metal spirals out of brass, silver and gold wire. But famously, they were quite uncomfortable to wear. Well,
yes and no. Some were really sculptures that you wore. Like, they were completely impractical. You could never put a coat over it. They were 15 centimetres up over your shoulders, and they would have sort of articulated bits of spirals of silver or brass or bronze or whatever, not bronze, brass usually he worked in, articulating and moving and not perhaps the most comfortable to wear. But if you're wearing a sculpture by Alexander Calder, you don't really care how comfortable it is,
well,
honestly.
No, but I don't think those notions of comfort or practicality come into artists' jewellery, do they?
No, as I was saying it right at the beginning, it's not the most foremost, thing in an artist's mind. And in fact, that's kind of where I get involved, if I'm collaborating with the artist, I try to get them to make it comfortable and practical and not sort of stick out and not painful, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But Calder was to me was the grandfather of the artist jewellery world, and he made everything by hand himself. He was never trained to be a jeweller. He didn't ever use solder. It was always sort of twisted wire, and in fact that's one of the ways that you know if you see a fake Calder is that someone's used some sort of solder or kind of proper jewellery materials, because he made his own pins, he made his fastenings, and he just did it because he was a sculptor, and he always had a pair of pliers in his hands and some wire, and that's how he just loved to do it, and that's why I think he was the greatest of them all.
I've just been in Venice, actually, and went again to see the bed head that he made for Peggy Guggenheim.
Yeah.
And again, there's no way you could lie back on that in comfort at all. But it's just so magnificent.
It's absolutely fantastic, isn't it?
And of course, so many avant-garde women like Peggy Guggenheim, Georgia O'Keeffe, Simone de Beauvoir wore his pieces. It was like, again, I'm sort of thinking of how you wear artist jewellery, that it takes quite an avant-garde sensibility to wear them, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, did you see the earrings that he made for Peggy Guggenheim beside the bedhead, and also the Jean Tinguely? And so when she opened her gallery in America, and it's coming from my brain, I think it's 1929, it was called Art of the Century, she couldn't decide what earrings to wear, so she famously wore one of each. She wore a Tinguely on one side and a Calder on the other, which just shows, you're quite bold to wear the Calder jewellery anyway, but to wear both and separately and differently, then I think people who wear it just wear it because they love it.
I remember when you very first opened your gallery in London, Louisa, and I think I wrote one of the first stories about some of the artists you were working with and photographed something by Anthony Gormley, which was some big, heavy blocks of steel. And I thought, my gosh, the woman who buys these, she can't ever wear them with a white blouse, for instance. No. It was always going to mark her white blouse.
But actually, that's a very good example. So when he was making those, I went to his studio and I said, what happens if someone's wearing this on a bare neck and it pinches? Because they were very sharp-edged and they were quite heavy. And if you moved, you could imagine that the little steel square edges would pinch your neck. So Anthony didn't like it terribly much because it wasn't kind of how he'd planned it. But we decided to put some rubber little sort of spacers in between, which worked really well, actually, and made it quite comfortable. But it was a compromise because I just said, you as you say, it's going to be too uncomfortable.
And I remember he said when I interviewed him, it'll look even more beautiful as it rusts.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of all this rust coming over somebody's outfit as they got ready.
Yeah.
But tell me, Manon, in the exhibition, you've got such a range of materials that these artists have used. Can you give us, you've got tortoiseshell, feathers, you have fur, don't you?
Yeah, actually we have the chance to exhibit the fur bracelets by Meret Oppenheim, which is probably one of my favorite surrealist artists. And it was a bracelet, it was this bracelet that we exhibit that gave birth to probably her iconic work of art, which is the fur cup kept in the MoMA in New York, and it's a beautiful piece of art. It's wonderful. So we have fur, we have gold, we have brass, we have stone, bone. What do we have?
Seashells, fabric.
Seashells by Aubé Breton. Yeah.
So anything can be become a precious object, any material.
That's another thing about artist jewellery is I think they don't mind what they make things out of. I know it's become more kind of fashionable now for contemporary jewellers to use any material, but I think going back in the 30s and 40s when some of these artists were making things, it was not in fashion. People didn't want things particularly made out of brass or silver or things, and they don't really care about what the material is made out of. It's what you make, not what it's made out of.
And when it's made, as you said, the sort of fabrication that is the challenge for artists. I mean, I think Picasso began using wax from his dentist, didn't he, Manon?
Yeah, well, around 1950, he met his dentist in Valoris, in the south of France, Roger Chatagnier. And at the time, the wax casting was a really advanced technique in dentistry. And so he began with his dentist on Wednesday afternoons to do pieces of jewelry with him. And these pieces of wax were later on cast in gold or in silver. And we have 3 of them in the exhibition. A sun, a satyr, and a dove, like it's a woman dove.
And Louisa, when you've been working with any artist, has there been any material that you've had to say, you know what, this is not going to work, we cannot fashion this into a piece of jewellery?
I can't think of anything that says the material, but I have had projects that have just not worked. So they've come up with an idea, we've made prototypes, we've almost gone into properly making something and then gone, no, you know what, this just isn't working right. It's not how you want it. It's not working out. It's not going to be a good piece. And so we've just kind of put it on hold.
And your prototypes, are those in
paper?
Paper, yeah.
Paper, brass, silver. We often use now because it's actually not that much more expensive. Or drawings. You know, they start off with a drawing, but then once you get into 3 dimensions, you can start to see how things are going to really come out. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And sometimes they just take a bit more work.
There is a lot in the exhibition made in precious metals, in gold. Do you think gold held a power for some artists like Max Ernst and Picasso?
Well, I think so. But also I think that a lot of them worked with the Hugos, the Francois Hugo.
The silversmith.
The silversmith, yes, from Valoris, who Picasso knew at a certain point in time of his life, and made some plates and trays, and then eventually some medallions were made. But because of Picasso's association with Francois Hugo, a lot of the other artists were attracted to Hugo, and Francois Hugo traditionally used this technique called repousser, which is where you you bang, if I may use that word, but you beat, that's the right word, you beat the gold into a recessed area which you've carved out of wood. So he would get the artists to carve the wood, and then he would beat the gold into it. And he used a lot of gold, and he was very good with the gold, and I think it was all 23 carat anyway, gold. And those pieces are huge. I mean, some of the Man Ray, the Poisson, are probably 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters in gold. So the value of the gold nowadays is really quite a lot. To forget about the artist value of it. But I think there's always been an attraction to gold. Gold is always the most beautiful material. It's the most favoured for making jewellery because it's the most malleable, but also at the same time, has longevity. And so it makes sense from for lots of reasons as to why people use gold for jewellery, and also as an artist, because it's a good way to express yourself.
And the textured surfaces of Max Ernst's pieces are rather beautiful, aren't they?
Well, that you see is exact translation from his hand. He would have carved out that wood, and then the wood, the metal sheet would have been beaten into it, so it would literally be a sort of direct replica or an inverted replica of what he had made.
But they're wonderful bracelets and rings in the exhibition. Paul Bury's metallic spheres on squares and cylinders. It's very recognisable, isn't it, their work? And do you think that's the job of an artist jeweller, to impose their stamp on the metal, as it were, so they they have something that's very identifiable as their work?
Personally, I think it's what makes it really good jewellery as a piece of artist's jewellery. I'm not sure everyone agrees with that.
Manon, do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think my favorite pieces of jewelry in the exhibition are the pieces when you just see it and you say, well, that's Nikit Saint-Phal, that's Louise Bourgeois, and you can just see in French we say la patte, just the thing of the artist.
I quite like to go around an exhibition and guess who they're all made by.
Yeah.
If you've been looking at this jewellery as long as I have, you kind of know. But it's quite fun for anyone who hasn't been looking at this jewellery for that long, but knows some of the artists, to go around and guess. And really, I think it's not that difficult, is it? Because the hand or the patte is quite recognisable. And it's like any piece of artwork. If suddenly someone produces something completely different to the rest of their oeuvre, then is it related? Is it linked? Is it maybe they're going a different direction and they're going to carry on and develop that? But maybe it's just a sort of one-off. And I like very much when it's linked to the artwork and to the artist, and it's very recognisable.
What made you want to get involved in artist jewellery in the first place, Louisa?
Gosh, well, it's a very long story, but to cut it very short, I did an exhibition of artist furniture, and then one Christmas I decided to do one of artist jewellery. I begged, borrowed and stole every piece I could put together, and I realised there was nothing happening in today's market, and so I started commissioning the contemporary artists to make jewellery. And that's when I decided I really liked it, because I loved getting involved with the making of the new pieces and working with the artists, and then I sort of found myself entrenched in this whole new world of little known information, because there really was very, very little around. And I've done a book recently which is a sort of introduction to the subject, just because I want more and more people to know about this market, because it's one of the great things I love in my job is when someone comes along, and Manon, you'll get this as well. It's like they say, gosh, I didn't know Picasso made jewellery. And you're like, yeah, well, there's a lot of artists who made jewellery, and many, many people don't know about it. And it's really interesting. It's fascinating from an art point of view and from a jewellery point of view. And it's also, I just feel like not enough people know about this. And I find when I go to art fairs and things, and I have people who are true art collectors or jewellery collectors as well, they are sometimes really surprised, and it's just really kind of rewarding to be able to open up this new world to people who don't know about it.
Well, it's certainly a way to have something unique. And I think part of jewellery is to set yourself apart. And if you have something unique, you certainly are able to do that with artist jewellery. We were just talking about precious metals and gold, and I had a feeling, Manon, in some of the pieces that there's a message about society and the price of metals in their work. I thought particularly with the Salvador Dali, the sort of anagram of his name in gold that sort of ends in dollars. Do you think there's a message about the appetite of gold and the homage to sort of money in that piece?
Yeah, it may have been. Actually, Salvador Dali used this anagram not just in this jewel. It was an anagram he just used a lot of times during his life, A Vida Dollars. And yeah, it was some kind of joke. But more generally than that, I would say that a lot of pieces in the second part of the exhibition are related to society, and not just in its financial component, but they can be critics of the society. And I'm thinking about the conceptual artist Cildo Meirelles, Brazilian artist, who just conceived a ring with actually, it's gunpowder in a gun barrel, and it has a lens. And if you put the original ring in the sun, it explodes. And it was just about how the art could be powerful. And it was very typical of this artist. Actually, the one we exhibit in the exhibition is an edition by her gallerist, Louisa Guinness. But the original one could explode.
That's exactly the point, Carol. It's the concept, and that's what's so interesting about the artist's jewellery. It's like to make something that might explode in sand. That's not what a traditional jeweller would do.
And so, was that? Do you think that was a message about the consumer society and buying things that it could explode?
I think it was more about what art can bring to society, which power it can have, and how much it can change things. And Sildo Mireles was a very critical artist with his society and with the politics and with everything. And it was I think it was meant to say that art can have power, and we can use it to say things. I think these are tools that move me too. It's when the artists are not used to this kind of practice and they just do one or two or just some. And I think it's the case of Janine Anthony, and I think her buttons. She made brooches that are called tender buttons, and they are cast after her nipples, and they're beautiful pieces, and I think it's the only jewel she did.
Yeah, that's also a very good point. I think when they make just one-off pieces like that, it's sort of often much more poignant, or they have a much better message behind them, rather than being too pre-thought out, pre-planned. Rather than they just sort of come from the heart.
Yeah, and they are not like reductions or adaptations of other works of art. They're just meant to be jewels, and they're beautiful pieces.
I always love seeing the pendants pending, the Man Ray spiral earrings created in 1970, and they sort of are so long. When were they created?
Yeah, actually it dates back to the beginning of his career, and it comes from a piece of art, a sculpture. Before being earrings, it was a sculpture.
And a light. There's actually a photograph in my book of a sort of lamp that he made.
Yeah, it was lampshade. It's called lampshade.
And they're so long. They're sort of like long curls that could be part of somebody's hair, aren't they, that come and frame the face?
There are two versions. There are the long one and a smaller one. But yeah, they're heavy. They're really heavy.
The other one I always love seeing is the Robert Indiana Love, the American pop artist, and he drew inspiration from signs and billboards, and he's best known for this series of Love, isn't he, with it in a particular typeface, and the letter forms spell out the world and are sort of slightly juxtaposed. I love seeing that love ring. And I think it's, he said it was a spiritual concept, not really about love itself.
I don't know, but then he used that format in many other versions. But what was interesting during the 60s, Revlon did a promotion and they were giving away those rings, which were made out of inexpensive materials, like very inexpensive materials, when you bought a lipstick. And so they must have done some sort of licensing with Robert Indiana at the time, and so they became quite hugely mass-produced. You can still find them. I've had them through the gallery from time to time, but they're not in any precious material and they're not editioned. And we've tried to get Robert Indiana, before he died last year, or a few years ago, to make some more rings, unsuccessfully at the moment, was unsuccessfully, but because that gold one that's in the exhibition is, I think, a very small edition and was sold many years ago, and it's impossible to find. Because like you, Carol, I would love one of those.
And actually, going back to sort of Picasso being secret about his creation of jewellery during his lifetime, Robert Indiana said creating his love ring was a marvellous idea, but it was a terrible mistake. It became too popular. And there are people who don't like popularity. It's much better to be exclusive and remote. So maybe that's another reason why Picasso was very secret about it. And, that maybe these jewels have to have the idea of intimacy to be important.
Yeah. Well, if he gave them out free with a lipstick, then he probably didn't mind them being popular, did he?
That's what he's probably talking about. The success
exactly.
may have been
No,
too
but
much.
rarity always creates, people want things that they can't have, don't they? And if there are only a few of them, then of course they want them more.
And that intimate way of entering someone's life, that it's something that only that person can have. Louisa, was it you who told me recently that the most expensive Picasso work ever sold at auction was a jewel, if you compare price to size?
Yes, it was the ring that I was talking about that was made for Dora Maar. It was a little painting of her, a portrait, set in a sort of ready-made bought Victorian frame set on a ring, and sold at Sotheby's for £580,000. I think it was in 2017 that happened. And if you look at it as a sort of per square millimetre or per square centimetre, it was the most expensive Picasso. So certainly sold around that time. I don't know if the records have been broken more recently, probably have, but at that time, no other Picasso was as expensive per square inch. And in fact, I really wanted to buy it, but the estimate was a lot lower. And I was discussing it with my husband, and he said to me, but why don't you just buy a bigger one if you really want a Picasso? That is the most expensive way you can buy a Picasso. And I said, well, it's a jewel. It's my thing. That's what I want. And he just wouldn't let me even look at it because he just said it's just far too expensive. But the fact that it's rare and it's unique, he may be wrong. I'm sure he's wrong.
Manon, tell me the pieces that you liked. Is there one designer, one artist in the show whose work really appeals to you personally?
Actually, I'm a huge fan of Louise Bourgeois. So the spiders it was wonderful to see them for real and to chat with Tjus Boulez, with whom they were made. And yeah, I think it was one of the greatest emotion of the montage of the exhibition. And actually I discovered, Janine Anthony and her tender buttons, and these, I think these are my favorite pieces in all the show because they're just they just acquired with time another signification because Janine Anthony had a breast cancer after doing them, and I'm just really extremely moved by these pieces.
And you love jewellery. Has jewellery always been something that you've been attracted to?
Actually, not. I'm not in this kind of well, it's not my passion. And when I was asked to participate to this project, I wouldn't be sure. I wasn't sure that it would passionate me, but actually it did, because it's a hidden but wonderful area of research, and I think there is a lot more to do.
I just want to reiterate what Manon was saying about the exhibition, because for me, as a collector and a avid follower of the world of artist jewellery, that this exhibition was really, really interesting. It is so hard to find these pieces that, as you were saying, Picasso's hidden away and given to people, and they've been stuck in people's drawers and things. And to see them come out, and then to see more of them in the catalogue, which understandably couldn't get everything into the exhibition, but to see them written about and images in the catalogue was really, really a pleasure and a treasure for me. And so I just think you did a wonderful, amazing job getting all that information together. So I'm glad to hear that it did warm your heart, and you were interested in it once you become it's a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And anyway, I thought it was really wonderful to see all these things together. It was a pleasure.
And now Manon will be dreaming about that Louise Bourgeois spider and how she can get her hands on one in the future.
Yeah.
Well, I might be able to help you.
So, Louisa, is there any artist at the moment that you feel should be making jewellery or you would like to encourage to make jewellery?
Gosh, well, I'm already doing that, Carol.
But who's in the future that you feel have that sensibility that would translate into jewellery very well?
I'm working already with quite a lot of artists. Gosh, there's so many that I see all the time and think, gosh, wouldn't they make amazing jewellery? It's difficult to get their attention. And making jewellery takes time. But I have got some things in the works. I've got some new pieces coming with Sue Webster, and she makes amazing things with spiders and spider webs.
I tell you who I've often been into their studio, and they're an artist in a different way, is the milliner Philip Tracy, who makes hats. And I've often been in his studio and picked up little pieces, tendrils of fabric or little patterns he's cut out and put them up. And I said, God, these should be earrings.
Yeah, he would make amazing jewellery. The problem is you kind of have to stop somewhere. I've been quite strict in trying to only work with artists because, of course, you could go to milliners and you could go to fashion designers and you could go to all sorts of talented, creative studio set designers. There's just hundreds of people who could make fabulous things. Interior designers even, and like you said, you had architects. But I guess I've just tried to keep my stable a bit more closed just because of clarity. I've got Nick Fidian Green making some new pieces, who made the horse's head on at Marble Arch. That's really interesting. But who else do I think would be? I mean, whenever I go to an art fair, so I'll be at Frieze next week, I'll walk around and I'll see people and I'll think about it. I am talking to one or two very big artists who will make really interesting things on the digital side of things. One of them is particularly interested in three-dimensional drawing through a sort of screen that you play, and we would paint jewelry on your face and then print it, and then you'd be able to wear it, and it would fit. That's a sort of new development as a medium, but it fits well with his medium because he's already a digital artist, or in certain ways digital.
So Manon, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the exhibition with us. I hope as many people listening can get to Barcelona now.
Yeah, because it's been extended.
And it's been extended, which is wonderful.
Until January.
Till January, so it gives us lots of time.
Thank you very
And
much.
Louisa, thank you very much for sharing your expertise in the world of artist jewellery. It was fascinating.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. And can I just say, please do go to the exhibition, because it's not every day you get to see something like that.
We will.
Thank you very much, Carol.
Thank you for listening. For more information about this and other episodes of If Jewels Could Talk, please go to our website, carolwoolton.com/If Jewels Could Talk. And if you liked it, please share it any way you can. You can find us on Instagram. And please subscribe to the podcast feed on any of the usual platforms where you find your podcasts, where we would love a rating and a comment. Please join us again in 2 weeks for the next Jewelled Nugget, when I'll be talking with London-based jewellery designer Theo Fennell, who takes jewellery and craftsmanship very seriously, but everything else to him is hilarious. And we'll be joined by two of his greatest fans and critics, the fashion designer Coco Fennell and BAFTA and Oscar winner Emerald Fennell, both his daughters, who'll tell us what they think about his career choice. If you watched the Oscars earlier this year, you will have seen Emerald Fennell take to the stage wearing a dazzling pair of morganite earrings designed by her father to collect the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for Promising Young Woman. What's happened to those earrings? Does she still have them? Or does he? Listen in and you'll find out. Goodbye. If Jules Could Talk with Carol Woolton is produced by Natasha Cowan, music and editing by Tim Thornton, graphics by Scott Bentley, illustration by Jordi Labanda, and you can find me on Instagram at Carol Woolton.